how to turn a negative team into a positive one. Do you have a team? Well, then you're in the right place. Hi, I am Dr. Paul Jenkins. I'm a positivity psychologist. I work with teams all the time to shift that negative energy into a more positive energy. Are you ready to dive into this? There are 4 specific strategies that I'm going to share with you and a free gift that you get right at the end. The first strategy that I'm here to share with you has to do with a paradox. There's a lot of paradoxes in psychology. That's something that is absolutely true, but seems like it couldn't possibly be true. And here's the paradox. Actually, let me tell you a story about this, because my son, when he was 21 years old, he had just come back from a volunteer opportunity to serve in our church as a missionary. And when he came home, he wanted to buy a car. Go figure, young adult wants wheels. So I take him down to the credit union, where I've been banking since 1984. And we sit down with a loan officer. Now remember, he's been doing volunteer missionary work for the last 2 years. He doesn't have a job yet. His credit rating doesn't even exist. He's a ghost in the system. And so as we're going over his application, this loan officer looks at him and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You don't qualify for this loan." So I throw my hat in the ring. I'm like, "Oh, what if I co-sign on that for him? Would that help?" And she looks at me like, "Oh yeah, that's great." So she starts entering my information. Guess what? She gets an even darker look on her face as she looks over at me and says, "Sir, that makes it worse." Now, I was messing with her a little bit. I'd been through a bankruptcy. Some of you might know my story that I've shared here on the channel a little bit before. I knew I didn't qualify for the loan. I didn't qualify for 5 cents, but I was kind of messing with her. And I reached into my pocket in my jacket and pulled out $3,000. That's the amount of the loan we were asking for this little beater car that we'd found, an old used thing. And I slide that over toward her on the desk and say, "How about if I give you the $3,000 to lend to my son, and then I get to co-sign on that note as well, and we can both build up our credit. How does that sound?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, we can give you good rates on that." This is the paradox. Connect with this. You can get the loan as soon as you prove you don't need the money. Wait, what? Is that true at the bank? It's absolutely true. If you desperately need the money, you're too big of a risk. They cannot afford to take that kind of a risk. If you don't really need the money, "Oh yeah, we'll lend that to you all day long." That's easy. Now think about your team. Are you a leader? Do you have a downline? Do you have an organization? Do you have a company? What is your team? What does that look like to you? And when you think, "Oh, they're so negative. What can I do to make it more positive?" You can have a more positive team as soon as you realize you don't need one. Wait, how could that possibly be true? That's why I'm calling it a paradox, okay? As a leader, you see all of the ways that your team could improve. Yes, and you're not wrong about that. They could improve in a lot of ways. The problem is the energy with which you come at the problem. And when we come in hot as leaders and we're like, "Okay, we got to improve some things around here," right? It's like that sign that one of the companies that I used to consult for had a sign. They actually made it up and posted it on the wall. It said, "The beatings will continue until the morale improves." Which is ridiculous. Beatings do not improve morale. And yet, why do we get so deluded in that as leaders? And we think, "Yeah, I need to really shape these guys up." Meanwhile, they're busy resisting and avoiding us. And they're going to go work somewhere else as soon as their little heart finds a place. Okay, so the paradox is, you can have a more positive team as soon as you realize that the team you have already is. And what if you were to focus on the amazing elements of positivity that already exist there? That puts you in a position to actually go create the upgrade instead of having them at odds with us. Now, I probably should have given you this disclaimer up front because the things that I'm going to share with you here are simple. Simple. Simple and easy are not the same thing. And whatever our programming is, whatever the habits are, whatever the patterns are that are already established, are going to try to keep hold on what we're doing. So this is simple, not necessarily easy. But I'll try to make it easier for you as we identify some of the tools and strategies. Let's get to the next one. Start with a leader's mindset. And by the way, you don't need a title to be a leader. And managers are a little different from leaders as well. Manager is kind of an interesting title because people can't be managed. If you've been in that role, you're probably chuckling right now because it's like herding cats. People are sovereign agents, meaning the greatest gift that we have as humans, next to life itself, is the power to direct that life. And because of that, we naturally resist management, someone telling us what to do. And if you have teenagers in your home, you experience this all the time. People can't be managed. They're sovereign agents. Now, they do respond to leadership. So my invitation to you is to take on a mindset of leadership. Leaders do not control, they influence. Leaders do not manage, they lead. I have a friend and colleague, Art Coombs, is a brilliant leadership author and expert. And he wrote a book called Don't Just Manage, Lead. And it speaks to that subtle shift in our mindset. It's not your job as a leader to make sure that anything. That is a manager's mindset. The leadership mindset is to inspire and guide and provide insight and vision to the whole team. Team culture mostly reflects leadership. If the leader brings clarity, optimism, vision, that naturally starts to play out in the team, starting with the levels of leadership that might exist in that organization. It is a very top-down process when it comes to being an example, not giving orders. You've probably seen it before, right? When one person can change the whole culture of an organization through their example, through their influence. Put it in the comments if you can think of a good example of this or where you've observed it. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Negative teams tend to focus on problems. And that's okay because usually the whole reason the team exists is to solve problems. What if we were to focus more on the solve part than on the problem part? Again, this is a mental shift that can make all of the difference. The risk of focusing on the problem is that our brain latches onto that and uses it as an excuse for why we can't do this or that. Well, the problem is this. And I've heard this in boardrooms or in planning meetings where an idea comes up for a solution. And somebody pipes up and says, well, the problem with that is, you know what? Anytime we come up with a challenge that we're trying to solve, that we're addressing, our brain is capable of giving us 5 reasons why we can't do that. And usually, especially if we're in an innovative space, it hasn't been done before, our brain is trying to protect us from getting into dangerous territory. And so it gives us these 5 reasons why we can't. Well, what if we were to shift from I can't because over to how can I? This is the shift from a negative team culture to a positive team culture. We can't because, and then we blame and list all of the reasons why we can't. Or how can I? And the best idea wins. One of the executives I'm working with currently is using that as a mantra, a saying that comes up a lot in their team meetings with their organization. The best idea wins. This is about what's right, not who's right. And that, by the way, is part of the negative team culture where it becomes about who's right instead of what's right. When brilliant minds collaborate, they can solve problems. Something that I've observed in many of the teams I've worked with is what I call personalizing the problems. Meaning, we identify the problem, then we take it very personally. Like, oh, it's my fault. Or we personalize the problem. We turn the problem into a person. Anytime we turn the problem into a person, we just created another problem. Because then we're at odds about who's right instead of what's right. I was having a little problem with my computer, and I called the software support line, and the software people said, no, that's not us, that's the hardware, right? That's a problem with your machine. So I called the hardware support people, and they're like, oh, that's not us, that's the software people. These brilliant minds are now blaming each other for the problem I'm having. Guess whose problem isn't being addressed? The guy who called. What if these brilliant minds that I think are all working for me in this context, what if they were to collaborate on the actual problem and quit bickering, arguing about who's right, get back onto what's right? Do you see the power of that shift over to the positive team culture? Wow. Now, one final thought before I give you that free gift that I mentioned. That is, what are we reinforcing? What if we were to spend more time focused on what we do want than what we don't want? Picture this. You go to the train station. You want to buy a ticket, but you don't want to go to New York City. Nothing against New York City, I'm just picking that as an option. Well, which destination is the only one that comes up for you right now? Well, I mentioned New York City, so you're thinking New York City, right? So is the ticket agent. I don't want to go to New York City. Well, where do you want to go? See, wouldn't that be a lot more useful to identify what we do want? You know that as a psychologist, I've worked a lot with couples, for example. And I remember back in the day when I was doing couples therapy and a lot of couples coaching. And a couple would come into my office and I'd ask, okay, so what do you want? What do you want? Let's fill out your order, what we're going to accomplish here. And she says, well, I just don't want him to be so lazy. And he says, well, I don't want her to keep on nagging me every time. Okay, they didn't answer my question. We do this a lot as humans. What if that subtle shift from negativity to positivity allows us to start identifying what do we want? So you look at your team. Well, I don't want you guys to waste time on your devices. What do you want? And you watch and reinforce and pay for and thank for the things that you do want. Powerful shift in an organization. All right, I promised you a free gift, and I brought one. This is my book, Pathological Positivity, where you can dive into the operating instructions for the equipment of your own brain. I am going to buy the book for you. I will pay for the book, you pay for shipping. Is that fair? Go to the URL on the screen, drpauljenkins.com, spelled with a DR, /free book. And I will pay for the book, you pay for the shipping. Let's get this into your hands and see if we can help to transition that team of yours from the negativity to the positivity. I've got you. Thanks for watching.